Welcome to the Ben Gregersen Show. Tonight, I actually want to discuss something a commentator for the Idaho State Journal said on Ralph Lillig's show a couple weeks ago. And I enjoyed that show, and I enjoyed seeing that commentator defend Ralph Lillig, because I think that Ralph does need defending, and I think that Ralph does a lot of good for our community, and I think he's a good man. And anyways, this commentator did make a comment that I want to challenge, because I don't agree with it. He said that he voted for Barack Obama because Bush supposedly lied about there being WMDs in Iraq. He said, quote, "We found no evidence of WMDs in Iraq," end quote. And tonight I actually want to refute that claim that was made by that commentator from the Idaho State Journal. First off, I want to start off by showing a memo. This is a memo. Let me put it on another, so you could see it here, on another camera. This is a memo that was declassified and shown to the U.S. House of Representatives. And in this memo, it says that we found WMDs in Iraq. Now, this memo was released in 2006, it was declassified in 2006, but this memo was actually written in 2004. This is what it says, and this is the unclassified section. The pages before just it's just a bunch of government stuff talking about departments and stuff, but this is what it says. It says, subject, Iraq chemical munitions. Purpose, this summary provides an unclassified overview of chemical munitions recovered in Iraq since May 2004. Key points. Since 2003, coalition forces have recovered approximately 500 weapons munitions which contained degraded mustard or sarin nerve agent. Despite many efforts to locate and destroy Iraq's pre-Gulf War chemical munitions, filled and unfilled pre-Gulf War chemical munitions are assessed to still exist. Pre-Gulf War Iraqi chemical weapons could be sold on the black market. Use of these weapons by terrorists or insurgent groups would have implications for coalition forces in Iraq. The possibility of use outside Iraq cannot be ruled out. The most likely munitions remaining are sarin and mustard-filled projectiles. The purity of the agent inside the munitions depends on many factors, including the manufacturing process, potential additives, and environmental storage conditions. While agents degrade over time, chemical warfare agents remain hazardous and potentially lethal. It has been reported in open press that insurgents and Iraqi groups desire to acquire and use chemical weapons. So this is a declassified memo that was given to the House of Representatives that shows that they found 500 WMDs in Iraq. The chemical and biological weapons that Saddam Hussein had. And this is significant because liberals have lied for years saying that Saddam never had WMDs, even though anybody who digs further in the issue knows that that's a lie, because Saddam Hussein used WMDs on his own people, and he used them against the Iranians. So we know that Saddam had them, and our soldiers found them. They found weapons of mass destruction. Now, I want to show you a video of Rick Santorum, he went on Fox and Friends to discuss what was in this memo that I just read to you. All right.
That there is WMD there. We got to take them out. They've used it in the past. They're going to use it again.
Right.
Saddam says, I've gotten rid of it all. And everybody around the world, all the intelligence says, bull, guess what? They found it. Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum joins us from D.C. Details on this, Senator. I can't believe the administration isn't shouting it from the rooftops. What was found?
Well, there was a report that was issued by the National Ground Intelligence Center that said that we have recovered and are still recovering chemical munitions, sarin and mustard-filled canisters. I mean, not canisters, actually weapons, warheads, munitions in country. They have been found in a variety of different ways, and the report, the declassified version of the report, suggests that there are others that we have identified and in the process of securing.
We understand, Senator, that a lot of them are old things, probably before 91, but they're still potent and they're still weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, the idea that we're suggesting that sarin gas degrades, sure, it degrades, but the report, the declassified report, is very clear that these weapons are still lethal. That's what the report says, that these are still lethal weapons. And I remind people that we have reports from when Saddam bombed the Kurds with chemical weapons. 3 of these sarin-filled munitions killed 5,000 people. The big concern we had, and I think it was expressed, you alluded to it, is that Saddam had these weapons. He said he didn't. He lied, obviously, not Bush, but Saddam lied that he didn't have these munitions, that he had destroyed these munitions, and we were concerned that he was going to give these munitions to terrorist organizations that could be used against us and others around the world.
Senator, what do you say to those who say these are not the weapons that we went to war for?
I don't know who's saying that. I can tell you I voted because I was concerned about Saddam having destroyed the chemical weapons that he said that he destroyed, that we had sent. Remember, we sent EMSCON in. We sent inspectors in to see whether he had destroyed these weapons. The fact of the matter is he hid them. The fact of the matter is that we are still finding them, and that this is a continuing threat.
Why so long before the release of this information? Why did it take so long for the White House to put this out and give the American people this knowledge?
Everything I have been able to find out from the White House is that they are not interested in discussing, why we went to war anymore. They feel like that debate is over.
Yeah,
More
we're the American people. We're the ones paying for our troops to be over there. They're the ones. Our children are giving their lives over there for Iraq, and I am frankly shocked that the administration, when they get the proof, and they've got a lot of it, that the reasons we went to war were there, that they don't go out and say, here it is. We deserve that, don't you think?
I do. That's one of the reasons that when I found out about this report, I asked for it, and I have asked for and received a declassified version, which is out.
Right.
And I believe there's additional information in that report that can be released to the public, and I hope it is.
Well, we're glad you did that, Senator. Because the insurgency is still strong. Just imagine what the insurgents might have done if they would have found 500 shells with sarin or mustard gas or any of that other stuff to people who are over there right now, Senator.
Well, that's a big concern. In fact, in the declassified report, they talk about that these insurgents have made it very clear that they are trying to get chemical weapons, and so being able to take care of this problem of getting rid of these weapons and destroying them, and finding them and destroying them, is a continuing problem in the country.
All right, Senator Santorum, thank you very much for joining us this morning and for getting word out about this declassified information.
So it is an absolute lie when people say that we found absolutely no evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That is not true, because we actually did find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I also want to point you to something that's on the Defense Department's website. This is an article that they have posted on there that was written by the American Forces Press Service, and it says it's by Samantha L. Quigley, and this is on the Defense Department website. It says, the 500 munitions discovered throughout Iraq since 2003 and discussed in a National Ground Intelligence Center report meet the criteria of weapons of mass destruction, the center's commander said here today. These are chemical weapons as defined under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and yes, they do constitute weapons of mass destruction, Army Cole John Chu told the House Armed Services Committee. Hello, welcome to the Ben Gregersen Show.
Hi, I'm just going to say I think those WMDs was all just a liberal plot to make it look like George Bush failed in his Iraqi venture, and I think that there really never was any proof that there wasn't those bombs and those chemical weapons, but there never was any proof that there was either. But now that they found the proof, I notice the liberal media is not even mentioning it. So that tells me that it was a plot and a plan all along to get Obama in by making George Bush into the villain. And so they're still making George Bush. They blame George Bush for everything. And yet now that they found WMDs over there, they're just keeping it totally quiet because they want to keep the lie going because they have to make Bush into the villain so they can continue to elect Democrats.
I agree with you. And don't you think that this is outrageous that we have found WMDs, and I have some more reports that I want to share about those WMDs, but yeah, we've found WMDs over there, and the media has not really reported it. They've kind of kept it, they've kept it quiet. And they keep perpetuating the lie that we went over there and we found nothing.
Well, I have heard two reports. There was a general from the Iraqi army that came forward, and he talked about those MWs that went over to Syria. And he said he was a part of it. He said they moved those into Syria before America even went in there to take out Saddam Hussein. And he just recently, within the last few years, has come forward to the American press. But it only showed up on one report on Fox, and they had him on Fox, and he was one of Saddam Hussein's generals. And he said, yeah, they had him and they moved him into Syria. But then we remember during the United Nations back in the Gulf War, we saw satellite images of those trucks moving those MWDs over to Syria.
Well, and that wasn't even during the Gulf War we saw that. That was just in the months before the second war against Iraq.
Yeah, you're right. It was before we went in there. They were showing those satellite images of all those trucks heading over to Syria.
And you know who saw those? You know who oversaw those satellite images? His name is James Clapper, and he said just by looking at those images and that footage from the satellites, he knows that, WMDs were taken into Syria. And James Clapper, it's kind of funny, he actually now works for the Obama administration. So Obama's given him a job somewhere.
So now he's not going to say anything, right?
He hasn't said anything, but he's on record, for saying that he knows that WMDs went into Syria. And it makes sense that WMDs went into Syria, especially since the Syrians now magically have WMDs. We had no idea they had WMDs just a few years ago, but recently we almost went to war over WMDs in Syria. Where did Syria get those WMDs? They got them from Saddam Hussein.
Now they're killing their own people with them. They've been dumping those chemicals on their own people.
And they got those WMDs from Saddam. You see, Assad and Saddam were both part of the same political party. They were both part of the Ba'athist Party. So Assad was covering Saddam's butt a little bit, by taking, those WMDs off of Saddam's hands. But I think it's important to remember that not all the WMDs were sent to Syria. There were some that were left behind in Iraq. that were hidden, and our American troops have found them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I was just showing here in this report here. But
you're Rachel Maddow, and who's the other guy? The guy that looks like the butch haircut. Those guys are not going to say nothing about this, because then it'll destroy their whole narrative, because they want to keep that narrative going that there is no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They have to keep that going in order to keep Democrats elected and make that war into an evil thing. But see, this general in Saddam's army said, when I heard him on there, he said that Saddam Hussein was planning on using those chemical weapons and dumping them on Israel. That was his whole plan.
Yep, and he did say, I actually got that video here.
If George Bush hadn't gone into Iraq, they would have went in and dumped those and killed thousands, if not 10,000s of Israeli people.
Yep, and that's true. I don't doubt that for 1 second. Those people hate Israel. I actually got the video here that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I play it?
No, I'll hang up and watch it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for calling.
Tell you that story. First, he was one of Saddam Hussein's top military advisors and the only man to disagree with the dictator and live to tell about it. Now, Iraqi General George Asada is breaking his silence with a new book, Saddam's Secrets: How an Iraqi General Defied and Survived Saddam Hussein. He joins us for an exclusive interview tonight. General, when did you come to the United States?
Well, I came 2 weeks ago.
But up to that point, you were in Iraq?
Yes, I was in Iraq.
And you were Saddam Hussein's top military advisor?
Yes, I was number 2 in the Air Force.
And how many years did you work under him?
Well, since the revolution of 1968.
From the beginning?
Yeah, I was retired in '86, and then I was recalled again when Iraq invaded Kuwait.
Yeah. You reveal in this book, there's been so much discussion about weapons of mass destruction, whether they had them, where they were stored, how they got rid of them when it came time for the United States to invade, and where are they now? You answer these questions.
Well, I want to make it clear, very clear to everybody in the world that we had the weapon of mass destruction in Iraq, and the regime used them against our Iraqi people. It was used against Kurds in the north,
right,
against Arab Marsh Arabs in the
but
south.
Some people say they were destroyed. Did we still have them leading up to this invasion?
No, we had a very good organization that Saddam was created to show some of them, but to continue hide.
So we had them.
Yes.
Where were they, and were they moved and where?
Well, up to year 2002, 2002, in summer of your theory, they were in Iraq. And after that, when Saddam realized that the inspectors are coming on 1st of November and the Americans are coming, so he took the advantage of a natural disaster happened in Syria. A dam was broken, so he announced to the world that he's going to make an air bridge.
You know for a fact he moved these weapons to Syria.
Yes.
How do you know that?
I know it because I have got the captains of the Iraq Airways. They are my friend, and they told me that these weapons of mass destruction have been moved to Syria.
How did he move them, General? How were they moved?
They were moved by air and by ground. 56 sorties by Jumbo 747 and 27 were moved to, after they were converted to cargo aircraft, they were moved to Syria.
So I assume this would not have happened without the permission of Damascus, is that correct?
Well, of course, you know, when the aircraft will land in Syria, they must have some sort of agreement between the two.
So the Syrian government knows exactly where these weapons are today?
I think so, because I am sure that these weapons have landed in Damascus, where they have gone.
Okay, let me ask you a question. This may be a little tough, but I have to ask you this, General. You talked about the use of these weapons, and it's been documented, the horrible use of them. And you were in the military during that time.
Yeah.
Do you have any personal regrets? Well, I mean, your military used these weapons, correct?
Yes.
And you were part of that. Yeah, and you were part of that military.
Well,
so I guess my question is, do you now feel a great deal of regret for having used the weapons?
Yes, of course. The Iraq have used that weapons. It was a great crime, and especially when it was used against our people, Kurd in the north and Arabs in the Marsh area.
And during the 8-year Iranian war, it was used against Iranians as well.
Yes,
right?
to be very frank, it was used when the Iranians used to penetrate our defenses in our territories.
Do the Iranians have chemical weapons of mass destruction as well?
Well, I cannot tell, but as you know, they are building now the nuclear project.
Last question for you. Did Saddam Hussein have a nuclear weapon capability? Was he moving towards it? And if so, when would he have had it if the United States had not invaded?
Well, you see, Iraq had some projects for nuclear weapons, but it was destroyed in 1981.
So there was no chance there were nuclear weapons or on their way to nuclear weapons when we invaded?
Not in Iraq.
Okay.
Hey, let me ask you about this. You described this conversation that you have with Saddam Hussein and your disagreement with him.
Yeah.
Not many people got to disagree with Saddam Hussein and live to tell about it.
Yes.
What happened?
Yes, actually, I had many times I have disagreed with Saddam Hussein in many things, and for some reason he used to believe me and he used to listen to me.
Yeah.
And thanks God that in the last war we were supposed to attack Israel by 98 aircraft, all equipped with nuclear chemical weapons in 2 waves. One wave through Jordan and the other wave through Syria, without telling Syrians and Jordan about that. But I mentioned to the president, sir, this is going to be a disaster because Israelis have got plans to destroy these airplanes before they go to Israel. Although whatever air defenses are good, but still some aircraft can penetrate.
Was he an evil man?
Well, I think to a certain degree, yes, he was.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Wonder if the mainstream media will pick up on your comments. Appreciate you being with us. And coming up tonight, the town of...
So that was a top general in Saddam Hussein's military, and he says that he saw Saddam Hussein's WMDs, his chemical and biological WMDs, moved into Syria. Now, it's important to remember that not all of those WMDs went into Syria. Some of them were left behind, and our troops did find them. And they found them all the way up until the end of the war, according to WikiLeaks. They found a lot more stuff than what was in those declassified memos, because the declassified memos are pretty old that I read before. But this here was just in I think it was actually in 2011 that the WikiLeaks memos were dug through, and they found all kinds of stuff about WMDs that were found in Iraq that WikiLeaks had revealed to the American people. Now, I'm going to read something here from Noah Shackman. He's a reporter at Wired.com, and he wrote an article here about the WikiLeaks dump that revealed that there were WMDs found in Iraq by our troops. He writes about that in here. And he wrote this. He said, by late 2003, even the Bush White House's staunchest defenders were starting to give up on the idea that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But WikiLeaks' newly released Iraq war documents reveal that for years afterward, U.S. troops continued to find chemical weapons labs and counterinsurgent specialists and toxins, and uncover weapons of mass destruction. Chemical weapons especially did not vanish from the Iraqi battlefield. Remnants of Saddam's toxic arsenal remained. Jihadists, insurgents, and foreign, possibly Iranian agitators turned to these stockpiles during the Iraq conflict and may have brewed up their own deadly agents. In 2004, for instance, American forces surreptitiously purchased what they believed to be containers of liquid sulfur mustard, a toxic blister agent used as a chemical weapon since World War I. The troops tested the liquid and, quote, reported 2 positive results for blister, end quote. The chemical was then triple sealed and transported to a secure site outside their base. 3 months later in northern Iraq, U.S. scouts went to look in on a chemical weapons complex. One of the bunkers has been tampered with, they write. The integrity of the sill around the complex appears intact, but it seems someone is interested in trying to get into the bunkers. End quote. Meanwhile, the Second Battle of Fallujah was raging in Anbar province, in the southeastern corner of the city. American forces came across a house with a chemical lab. Substances found are similar to ones in lesser quantities located a previous chemical lab, end quote. The following day, there's a call in another part of the city for explosive experts to dispose of a chemical cache. Nearly 3 years later, American troops were still finding WMD in the region. An armored Buffalo vehicle unearthed a cache of artillery shells that was covered by sacks and leaves under an Iraqi community watch checkpoint. The 155 mm rounds are filled with an unknown liquid, and several of which are leaking a black tar-like substance. Initial tests were inconclusive, but later the rounds tested positive for mustard. But even late in the war, WMDs were still being unearthed. In the summer of 2008, according to one WikiLeaks report, American troops found at least 10 rounds that tested positive for chemical agents. These rounds were most likely left over from the Saddam-era regime. So, folks, the point I wanted to get to tonight is that it's a lie when people say that no WMDs were found in Iraq. That is absolutely true. It's a lie. And it's also a lie when people say that Saddam Hussein never had WMDs. Now, next week, I want to talk about this issue even more, because there is even more incredible evidence to go over. And one of them is the fact that they found 550 metric tons of yellow cake uranium in Iraq, and the Iraqis sold it to Canada, and Canada is now using it for nuclear power. That's a lot of yellow cake uranium, and I don't think Saddam Hussein had peaceful purposes for that uranium. We all know that Saddam Hussein desired to create nuclear weapons, and he was stockpiling on uranium. And if Saddam Hussein had a chance to make that bomb, I bet that he would have dropped it on Israel or on the United States. He probably would have dropped it on the United States first, because he hates America. He loathes this country. Saddam Hussein praised 9/11. And we shouldn't forget that Saddam Hussein was also a state sponsor of terror. And when President Bush began the war on terror, he said that we would go after any country that harbored and supported terrorism. And Saddam has a record and a history of supporting terrorists. He even paid a terrorist to assassinate a former president.